J'ai fait comme le président, Monsieur le Président du Sénat.
So I've just done as the chair does. Chair of the Senate, President of the European Central Bank, chairs, dear colleagues, we are now going to resume our work for this third session, the theme of which is achievements and future of the euro. We are celebrating this year the 20th anniversary of the circulation of the euro, of its introduction. This is a visible and concrete highlight of the European Union and is important for the integration of the single market, but also for European citizens. The euro is also an instrument to affirm Europe at the global scale, including in its digital form. It is particularly important that parliamentarians strengthen the control of the evolution of the Eurozone and the political decisions that determine it. We are pleased to welcome Madame Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank. We are very pleased to welcome her here, and we would like to thank her for her presence here in Paris. Prior to giving her the floor, I would first of all like to invite my colleague, Sabine Tellier, Chair of the National Assembly European Affairs Committee, to deliver a status before Madam President. Thank you very much, Chairs of the Senate, Madam President of the European Central Bank. I'm also very pleased to welcome you here to our first interparliamentary conference organized in the framework of the French presidency of the Council of the European Union. It's the 20th anniversary of the euro, and we must measure the progress made since its introduction. I think that sometimes we don't necessarily realize the work that we have done, and as a simple citizen, I have two nationalities. I'm French and German, but the euro was really a liberation, because when I wanted to go to my second home in Germany, I always had to calculate French francs, Belgian francs. Did I have enough petrol in my car to get to Germany, or would I need French francs, Belgian francs, Deutschmarks? It was very complicated, and it was very liberating and freeing to be able to buy petrol more easily, and it has improved the day-to-day life of our citizens. Our young people have not known any other currencies, and I think that they are actually incapable of converting euros to francs or Deutschmarks, something that we could not imagine at the time. So I do think that this is significant progress, even if there are things that remain to be improved. The euro has made us stronger collectively. Some people speculated on the breakdown of the eurozone and the end of the euro. It is our belonging to the eurozone and the responsiveness of the monetary policy of the ECB under the initiative of Mario Draghi and under your initiative as well that have enabled us to traverse the financial crisis and the health crisis. The response to this crisis has demonstrated the strength of this symbiosis between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Without the resolute action of the ECB, a majority of the states of the Eurozone would not have been able to protect their citizens and their businesses as they have done. And only the budget could target this support, and it has been very effective. Too often over the last decade, the monetary policy has been our own tool for stabilization. We must find the means and resources after this discussion on economic governance to extend beyond the crisis the symbiosis between the monetary policy and the budget policy for the stability and the prosperity of the Eurozone. This can be done by defining good tools for coordination between the national fiscal policies, and I'm convinced will allow us to increase the budgets, the shared budgets, beyond the next generation recovery plan. So this is a difficult field, but it is very important, and I think that we have a very crucial question that we must answer. Are we a community of European fate, or will we always remain competitors? Thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor to Madame Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank. Thank you very much once again for accepting our invitation. Madam President, you have the floor.
Je peux retirer mon masque maintenant.
Oui, oui.
Je fais ce que vous me dites.
Oui,
Hein.
retirez-le, retirez-le. Si vous êtes plus à l'aise comme ça, allez-y.
If you're more comfortable removing your mask, you can go ahead.
Monsieur le Président du Sénat,
President of the Senate, Girard, chairs of the European Affairs Committee of the Senate and the National Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, chairpersons of the different committees.
si vous me permettez, avant d'aborder les thèmes que vous avez
Before moving on to the themes that you have already started to discuss, I would like to remind you of a great European who was, up until very recently, the President of the European Parliament and whose funeral is taking place in Rome today, David Sassoli, who has just passed away, whose death has really shocked us. And I would like to, in his honor, just cite a sentence that he said during his inaugural speech as the President of the European Parliament 2 years ago. He said the following: Europe has a lot to say. We must know how to express ourselves as one. I think we must not forget his commitment and the expression of the European force that he'd had when he was the head of the European Parliament. Chairs, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me first and foremost to thank you, to allow me to debate with parliamentarians from right across the European Union. So 27 years ago, President Mitterrand declared at the beginning of a previous French presidency of the European Union, he said, Europe must be increasingly democratic and it must be increasingly parliamentarian. And these words hold their value today. And what progress have we made since this time? In January 2002, the inhabitants of 12 countries of the European Union were able to hold for the very first time these notes and these coins in euros, as you mentioned, Madam Chair. This was 20 years ago. 20 years later, more than 340 million people use this legal tender in their day-to-day lives. And this single currency is much more popular than we would have thought. However, this path has not been easy. We have had to traverse a number of crises: the global financial crisis, the sovereign debt crisis, and now the crisis linked to the pandemic. We have had to adapt and strengthen our institutional framework a number of times, but despite those who were skeptical, who would have guessed this. But despite all of this and against all expectations, we have managed to succeed, and we have been able to recover from each crisis and come out of each crisis much stronger. We are now exiting the emergency phase of the pandemic, and we must ensure that we have a collective response. As we enter into a new phase, we must ensure that we preserve this sense of unity and the course that has been set out for us. We must build on the foundations that we have already laid over the last 2 years and implement the lessons that we have drawn from this. If we manage to do this, then we will be able to transform our achievements into sustainable progress for Europe. I'd like to identify 3 directions that I think it's important to make progress in. First of all, in terms of stability. Secondly, improving supply and our strategic autonomy. And these 3 themes, as you will see, are all linked. The COVID-19 pandemic was a significant shock for our societies and our economies. However, it enabled us to demonstrate Europe's capacity to guarantee the stability that our economy needs. When leaders work to the same objectives, the results can be spectacular. You will remember that at the beginning of the first major financial crisis in September 2008, think back. This was the moment when we were able to tell ourselves progress has been made, but we required 7 years to return to levels before the crisis. Now, the European economy has surpassed its levels of from the first few weeks of 2022, just 2 years. And this is due to the joint response of European authorities and national authorities. As it relates to us at the European Central Bank, we were able to quickly launch a set of exceptional measures to stabilize financial markets, to assure the good transition of the monetary policy and to protect the stability of price stability. Our commitment has enabled us to help businesses, households and public authorities to overcome this pandemic. At the same time, the supervisors of the ECB have taken all the measures to enable banks right across the zone to guarantee the transmission of our measures. And these measures, the measures of the ECB, have contributed to saving more than 1 million jobs in the Eurozone. Monetary policy was supported by a very ambitious response. Fiscal policies seeking to stabilize employment and income. Governments have also provided direct support to workers and to businesses. They have demonstrated flexibility and solidarity at the European level. Budgetary rules were provisionally suspended and new budget instruments were implemented, in particular the program that I will call the Next Gen program, Next Generation EU. All of these measures created the conditions for greater recovery than we imagined just 1 year ago. As we move towards the end of this crisis, we still need stabilization. We must ensure that the opening of the economy, which has led to an increase in fuel, electricity, gas, and other sustainable goods and services due to a higher demand for a lower supply.
The annual inflation rate in the Eurozone reached 5% in December. That doesn't mean that we had an average of 5% over the year 2021. It means that comparing December 21 to December 20, we saw that there was indeed a difference of 5%. Now, within that 5%, the energy component is about half of that. Half of the price increase was down to energy increases. The same factors have a negative effect on growth in the short term, which has slowed down in the fourth term of 2021. In the fourth quarter, because the increase in energy costs does actually weigh on both households and industry, and also limits our demand. And also we saw a lack of supply, which impacted upon our manufacturing sector. We expect this to pick up again in 2022, but we've understood that this price increase has actually given rise to concern for a number of our citizens throughout the European Union. We take this very seriously, this concern. And that is why I want to confirm and reaffirm, as much as I need to today in front of you, that we are committed to ensure that we have price stability. That is something which we will not let up. We will take all measures necessary to achieve our goal of inflation at 2% in the medium term. So, with that in mind, when we had our meeting on the 16th of December last on monetary policy, the governors from all of the Eurozone, governors of the banks in the Eurozone, decided to see a gradual reduction of assets over the year 2022, going from an average of about 80 billion euros per month down to 20 billion net euro per month. We want to keep our flexibility, which will enable us to actually counter different scenarios. And within this scenario, we felt that monetary support, even if we reduce it, is still necessary if we wanted to bring inflation down to 2% in the average in the medium term. So that is as far as stability is concerned. Monetary policy, of course, also works on the demand side of things to make sure that we have production at a stable level, at the level of its potential. This is determined by other decision makers. However, it's not the European Central Bank, and nor from any central bank can we decide on this level. It's the Europeans, it's the dynamic companies that we have in Europe and the framework within which they act, and that's where you're responsible. And that brings me to the second area which we should be working on together, and that is how we can actually improve supply. Structural transformations which are underway right now in our economy could have a real impact on supply. The digital transition, the ecological transition, these are all actually, these have all been speeded up by the pandemic. If we want to see growth in the future, supply and demand have got to develop at the right rhythm as the economy develops. The economy is already becoming greener thanks to the way in which consumers have changed their behaviour and because of the pressure that has been brought by new regulation. But I am convinced that Europe will find a new potential for growth in this green economy. 9, as I said, 9 of the main actors or stakeholders in the area of digital and ecological innovation are European. And if the supply cannot actually be boosted in the next couple of months, in the foreseeable future, it's going to be very difficult for us to get the economy running as we want it to be. We also have, of course, to look at the energy sector. Of course, we've got natural gas, which is being used to boost our economies right now, but we need to work towards the decarbonisation of our industries. And if we aren't able to do this, then our green transition is going to be slower. So we need to actually be able to turn towards green technologies and renewables. Otherwise, we will end up with a risk of disruption. We have an opportunity in France because our response to the crisis was based not only on stabilizing demand, but also reorganizing supply towards sectors which have a promising future. The Next Gen program, which I mentioned earlier, is a unique instrument across the world. Wherever you look, whether you look to the East, the West, the USA, other advanced economies, you'll see that Europe is a pioneer and the only stakeholder at this stage to try and reorganize the supply sectors. This is a unique instrument, as I said, which can actually trigger the investment that we need. So it's important that we are able to support its success. If you, the national parliaments, it's up to you who are able to actually guarantee the quick implementation of the reform and investment plans which have been presented by the member states. But we can't be satisfied with the 750 billion euros of next-gen financing. That is a remarkable amount, it's a remarkable capacity, and it's going to be provided until 2026. But the ecological transition, the green transition, needs more. We need 500,000 million euros more every year if we want to actually achieve the objectives that were set. If we want to actually really compete with our partners, China and the USA, in digital, we need to make sure that 25 billion euros extra are made available every year. If we want to actually overcome this gap, if we want to fill this, we've got to find a way of mobilizing private investment capacity, not just in Europe, but across the world. And we need to be able to do this thanks to what? Well, thanks to a robust European financial sector, which is resilient, diversified and strong. I imagine you've heard about the CMU, Capital Market Union, the single market of capitals. We talk about this a lot. We're trying to push this forward. We're trying to make progress, and we're still talking about it today. I believe that not only should we complete the banking union, which is 2/3 finished, but we still are missing part of the banking union, but we've got to actually go further to develop the single capital market for union. I made an appeal last year that we actually try and focus on concluding the green capital markets union, because indeed investors are the best placed to finance the most risky and most innovative projects which are required for the green transition and the digital transition. And in that area, we also have an advantage because we would be the first ones, we would be the disruptors. 60% of the green bonds that have been issued have been within the European Union. So how can we move forward? In Europe, legislative proposals which were put forward by the Commission in its action plan for a capital markets union are a useful discussion basis with our co-legislators, but we need to make progress. We need to make progress at national level. Fiscal reforms are required, regulation reforms to support investments in risk capital and in bonds. This is required if we want to have a better integration of our capital markets. And this has got to be done closely, working closely with the different national parliaments. If we were able to adopt these reforms, I'm not going to say much about the banking union, but of course the banking union is the second large-scale project that we need to make progress on. But if we were able to take on these reforms, we'd be able to consolidate and dynamize the stock markets in Europe, which actually are suffering compared to other economies across the world. Strategic autonomy in Europe, which is something which was discussed time and time again, that it needs proper foundations. It needs a proper structure. We need to make sure that we build this stone by stone. This strategic autonomy of Europe is going to be reinforced by that, and that would enable us to have better and more sovereignty at European level. And that's the third area within which we want to work. We need to look and see what has been achieved during the pandemic. We were able to undertake a number of measures over the last 2 years, which has given us greater autonomy across the world, a better balance between monetary policy, budgetary policy. We have been able to push to stimulate growth through increasing demand internally. The Next Gen program has also got the credibility of providing for a new type of bond and secure bond within the European Union. If you followed the bond issues of the Next Gen bond issues, you will have probably been surprised to see the hunger that the markets had for these products. So we want to see the reform programs that were from the Next Gen framework being implemented quickly. That would enable us to consolidate the confidence that we have, that the investors have in this new type of bond. And in this framework, the central bank has actually managed to work to achieve a lot of extra European funds. But of course, there's a new fund. We've got to look also at our place in the world. We've seen that the pandemic has pushed the digital transition forward. People have turned towards digital. Numeric digital payment is now commonplace. Most of the companies in Europe have already benefited from the crisis to actually promote and progress further in their digital transition. And so a strategic autonomy of Europe is very important given the extent of the digital transition and the advances made by other economies in the world. So we've got to react. We've got to act now together on the digital area to make sure that we have the control of the key areas and to establish the standards that we want as Europeans and what our consumers want. Recent initiatives such as legislation on digital acts, the DSA and the DMA, really show how we need to develop the next decade. These are going to actually show or establish a European position on the world markets and promote our standards across the globe. The European Central Bank, that I have the honour of presiding over, has also been able to prepare Europe for the new digital transition. You all know the bank notes that we have in Europe. You're all familiar with our coins. You also know the euro coin, but now we're working a lot on a digital euro, and this is something which I think is very important in the future digitalization of the economy as we see it. We're working right now on the key issues which would be created by its conception and distribution. It's a very complicated matter. We've got to ensure that there is security, confidentiality, that trade is solid between the various stakeholders involved. And during this work, in the course of 2023, we believe that stakeholders, as well as the European Parliament and the national parliament, will be able to decide, along with the European Central Bank, of course, and along with the European Parliament, what the next step will be for the digital euro. Digitalization would allow people within the European Union to have a simple payment method, risk-free, simple, not using a private operator, but the central bank, having a public and universal backer and accepted across the euro. A digital euro would also open new opportunities for companies, and it would be a catalyzer for new technologies and innovation. The European intermediaries would be able to offer better services and remain competitive vis-à-vis other players who are in the market already, payments market, and aren't waiting for us. It would also ensure that we have financial and monetary sovereignty in Europe. For those of you who are nostalgic about the old currencies, and you all who actually like to have the coins and notes in your hands, the digital euro is not going to replace the physical euro, but it's going to work alongside it. That's why we are now actually celebrating the 20th anniversary of the notes and coins, euro notes and coins, and we're now actually developing the new conception of coins and notes so that Europeans of all generations will feel closer to their currency rather than having the old these old notes and coins that don't really speak to them. So on that, I think I can conclude to say that our common action faced with the pandemic has enabled us to consolidate what we had. I think we're coming out of this crisis. We believe that we're all coming out of this crisis stronger, no doubt, stronger, and with solid basis on which we can construct our future. There is work yet to be done, and even though we've seen the urgency of the crisis is now passing, what we've seen now is that this resilience that we saw during the crisis can be maintained. We've got to maintain that resolution. At the last presidency of the European Union, President Sarkozy at the time declared, we must ensure that Europe gives itself the wherewithal to play the role that it should be playing in this new world that is actually emerging. And those words hold true today. We're now able, in this new phase, which is just starting, to take the decisions which would enable us to overcome the difficulties that we're being faced with. This is the best way to show our citizens and the whole world that Europe brings us together, and that when we are together, we are stronger. Now, I am happy to take any questions that you may have. So I don't know whether I should stay here at the front, or whether I should actually sit again. No, you may sit, because we've got a list of speakers. We've got a whole speakers list to go through. Thank you very much, President of the European Central Bank. I think we can give you a round of applause. Well, dear colleagues, like this morning, as we did this morning, we're going to have a debate now with different contributions, but we're going to give you a little bit more time. This time you have a maximum of 2 minutes 30 per speaker. And we'll use the same procedure as earlier on. I will call on one speaker and ask the next speaker to be prepared. So, Madam Satu Hassi from Finland, I'm going to give you the floor first of all, but I would ask Ruben Moreno for Spain to prepare to speak afterwards.
Mr. President, and thanks a lot for Ms. Lagarde for her excellent presentation, as well as for the presidency for taking up this very topical issue. Euro has brought us both stability and instability. Stability, for example, in keeping inflation and interest rates much lower than they used to be. For example, in my country, before Europe, both the inflation and interest rates were very much higher. On the other side, we remember the euro crisis a bit more than 10 years ago. Some of the problems the euro area has faced were foreseen by at least some economists before introducing the euro. And now there are at least two problems to solve. The rules have not effectively prevented growth of public debt, but anyway, the rules create a push towards pro-cyclical fiscal policy, which is the contrary of how fiscal policy should be. Anyway, proper functioning of the Economic and Monetary Union and the euro area is vital. When developing the EMU, we should look beyond acute crisis management and anticipate also the future. More emphasis should be given to member states' debt sustainability. The rules should allow flexibility when it's needed, but in accordance with predefined and uniform criteria. Also, the European semester should take better account of the interactions between economic, social, employment and environmental actions and policies, as well as the need of green restructuring of our economy. So we are looking forward to the debate on reforming the EU's fiscal rules during the French presidency. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give the floor to Ruben, and then we'll ask our colleague from Croatia, Hadjukovic, to prepare for the next speaker.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam Lagarde and Mr. Chair. The COSAC was born in Madrid in 1989, but it was also in Madrid later in 1995 that member states decided that the new common currency would be called the euro. And the euro has given us everything you would expect from a strong currency: greater stability, competitiveness, and prosperity of European economies. So, in sum, it's improved the lives of citizens and European businesses. However, the success of the euro is also reflected in its capacity to resist crises, as we saw in the global financial and economic crisis of 2008 and the coronavirus pandemic. And this is all despite the fact that the euro architecture wasn't originally designed to respond to these crises. All of this has been possible thanks to greater coordination and integration, which is always the correct response to any kind of doubt that may arise within the European Union. We mustn't forget this. It's taken a devastating pandemic to lay bare the depth of our interdependency and the strength of our unity, in case anyone had any doubts about this. But the euro is much more than this. It's one of the clearest examples of European integration. It's a symbol of identity, unity, integration, and values. But we must continue working further. We need to strengthen the international role of the euro. We need to incorporate the digital dimension as well. But we also need to change and update fiscal rules. We need to make them more simple, more transparent. And this is specifically because national parliaments must be able to take ownership of these fiscal rules so that there's no disconnect between national budgets and the norms that are discussed in Brussels. They also need to be monitorable. We have not enforced any sanctions despite there having been 4 major crises. We need to establish a real oversight mechanism. And we could also condition access to European funds that are available at any given time to compliance with fiscal rules. Our currency and the central bank are extremely powerful, but in order to maintain that strength, we need to engage in innovation and constant adaptation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Domagoj Hadjukovic, followed by Madame Jaslowica.
And I definitely salute the French presidency of the Council of the European Union for taking this subject up, because we are celebrating 20 years, or 20th anniversary rather, of introduction of euro, a very unique experiment, I would say, in the European history and in the world history. We can debate whether it was a success? I would say yes. That it had its difficulties, it definitely had. But in the end, many countries have recognized the benefits of a mutual currency, introduced it, and benefited from it greatly. Just to avoid the inconvenience of exchanging money when visiting to some others. Although I must say that I do share some concerns with my honorable colleague from Finland, who said that there were benefits, but there were also drawbacks. And why am I mentioning this? Because Croatia has the ambition to join the Eurozone, hopefully in the foreseeable future, because all the respective financial elements we need to fulfill before the joining are more or less fulfilled. But my skepticism comes from the possible instability, especially in the prices. So when the euro was first introduced, we saw a rapid inflation. Hopefully that will not happen to Croatia. There are some other examples who were very successful in this transition period. I like to point out the experience that Slovakia had, and they were very successful in that. So hopefully Croatia will be able to join the Eurozone and the Schengen area in the end, and with that our accession to the European family will be complete. So I hope that this 20th anniversary will also be very important for Croatia as well, and that we will join Euro. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Danuta, you have the floor, followed by Dario Stefano for Italy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam President, thank you for joining us for this meeting. Thank you for your speech, but that was too short. I'm still very hungry to know more. So during your speech, you mentioned digital euro, and you were saying that probably in the future we will discuss together with our society and we'll decide what will happen with digital euro. I'm wonder of your opinion. Shall we prepare strategy? What kind of it? Shall we forget about digital euro? And how do you think, how can we discuss with people about it? How can we prepare people for digital euro in the future? And when it can happen, because as you mentioned also, the pandemic time changed our life very rapidly, especially in terms of digital issue. So thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Danuta. Dario Stefano, you have the floor, followed by Mr. Christian Buschmann.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. To fight against the economic and health crisis following the COVID pandemic, the European Union has changed its economic policy paradigm, and we are making every effort to recover acceptable conditions of development and protection of employment. The Recovery and Resilience Plan is the role model, and resources are being pooled in order to promote projects of common interest, like the double transition, green and digital, for the states, for the member states. But then there has been a stronger role for the European Investment Bank, the definition of a new pandemic line of the SME, and rules on more flexible state aid, and the action of the European Central Bank that has established a number of new measures, of new ad hoc measures for the pandemic. For all this, we thank you, Madam President, Mrs. Lagarde. Of course, this is an extraordinary situation, but the nature of European integration itself should push us forward when we are facing a crisis. Now, the reflection that has been opened by Presidents Macron and Draghi on the European economic policy of the next few years is pushing us to ask questions on what kind of Europe we want for the future, because I believe that that Europe has made strides forward in the context of our response to the pandemic, but we are not yet in a position to deal with the main challenges ahead. Next Generation EU introduces an important discontinuity in the paradigm through which we face systemic crisis. It might be a first step towards the creation of a real fiscal union with a permanent and autonomous possibility to draw European loans, in continuity with the reforms foreseen by national recovery plans, and also in order to ensure the digital and economic transition, which is way more important, way more difficult than we think. And at the same time, we are witnessing a very close link between the economic and the social dimension of Europe, which should lead towards a situation where the European semester should become a sustainable semester, a broader sustainable semester, and a new and integrated stability and growth pact, integrated with aims of social stability, sustainability, with quantitative yardsticks such as the unemployment rate, the poverty rate, the per capita income, the birth rate, and women's employment or youth employment, and other indicators of social welfare and the degree of social inclusion and cohesion. So this is it, and there's a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Mr. Christian Buschmann, followed by Mr. Calgulade from Estonia.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Frau
Chair,
Lagarde,
President Lagarde, dear colleagues, the euro has now been with us for 20 years. It's been the common currency and the basis for the working of the European economy, the economic framework, and it's been part of the reason for our well-being, and it's also shown contributed to the resilience of our economic area. For all citizens of Europe, however, and also for companies within Europe and for the public authorities, for our public financing as well, the euro has actually been a key advantage. And we've also seen that the budgetary rules have got to be stuck to by all parties. And I was very pleased to hear what President Lagarde has said about there being an aim of bringing the inflation down to 2% in the medium term, and that was very much music to my ears. A lot has been said about the banking and the capital markets union, and I'm very pleased to hear that there's been an effort to green the capital markets union, and I think that this is very good when we talk about green bonds and other tools. It'd be a good thing for us to strengthen the use of this in order to produce greater economic growth and to create jobs within Europe and to develop jobs further. President Lagarde has also mentioned the efforts that have been taken up to develop a digital euro. And I think that this is going to exist alongside the notes and the euro notes and coins that we have today. And I think that the digital euro could actually be another essential instrument for Europe in the future. It's going to ensure that the risks and the security of this currency have been properly checked and verified. But I think that, and compared to other possibilities, but I think that this is a very clever move towards the digital euro for the European economy, and I think it's going to be very useful for European citizens. Of course, we need to have a proper check on the basis of valid information to make sure that it is valid, because I think we would have a European Central Bank who would be able to secure this digital currency.
Thank you, Mr. Christian Raymond, followed by Mr. Keridis from Greece.
Colleagues, I think for my generation, the European Union and also the euro has been really an important guarantee of both prosperity and security in the future. And I would remind you that Estonia joined the euro and we started using it on the 1st of January 2011. And I'm sure you remember that this means that we prepared for the adoption of the euro during a terrible financial crisis. And Estonia was very heavily impacted by it. The worst year, we had a drop of GDP by 15% at the same time as we were preparing to adopt the euro. And to adopt the euro, we also had to follow very strict fiscal limits. And it was sometimes difficult to explain to our citizens why this is necessary, but we did that, and we turned this crisis, the financial crisis, into a success story for our country by doing so. Now, for the European Union, also the Eurozone, to remain a source of opportunity and stability in the future, of course we need to embrace innovation and digitalization. And I think President Lagarde's message on the digital euro, for my country, for my generation, this is an important development, definitely. But at the same time, I would stress that we also need responsibility, because we cannot have a prosperous future without innovation. We cannot have a prosperous future without fiscal responsibility. Neglecting either one of them would hurt the future generations of Europeans. So with that, I end my little speech and thank all of you. This is my first time in this body. It's been a great experience. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Raymond. Dimitris Karidis, followed by Mr. Dragomir Stoinev.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to have you with us today, Mrs. President of the European Central Bank, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the euro. I wish I were there with you to enjoy the legendary French hospitality, but unfortunately, COVID has decided otherwise. We had the pleasure to host President Gerard Larcher recently at the Greek Parliament in Athens. I am sure we can meet together in March. Now, allow me to go straight into my questions for your kind consideration, Mrs. President. Having the privilege to represent the country, Greece, that has suffered the most in the Eurozone, especially during the past 10 years. But the Greek people has remained committed to the Euro project, both for economic and political reasons. So here are my questions. First, how do you assess the growth prospects of the euro for the immediate future, in particular of Southern Europe and countries such as Greece that have diverged from the European average in the previous 10 years? Second, in the past, as the head of the IMF, you had accused the Eurozone for a chronic economic underperformance. Are you happy with the progress achieved so far in addressing this problem, and what needs to be done further in that regard? Thirdly, you have resisted the calls for rate hikes. I wonder if you continue to be as forceful today as a few weeks ago, and what is your take on inflation in 2022? And finally, what is the ECB's position on strengthening the fiscal component of the Eurozone, and in particular by turning the recovery fund, what is famously known as Next Generation EU, into a more permanent arrangement, a more permanent mechanism? I am encouraged by your opening remarks in that regard, and I want you to have the chance to further develop your position on that very important policy area, the fiscal consolidation and strengthening of the Economic and Monetary Union of EMU. Thank you very much. Merci, Dimitri.
Thank you, Dimitri. Mr. Dragomir Stoinev, followed by Marko Pavic.
Monsieur le Président, Madame
President, Madam Chair of the National Assembly European Affairs Committee, Chair of the Senate European Affairs Committee, Dear colleagues, it's undeniable that the 20th anniversary of the euro has been a strategic asset to the European Union. Over the past decade, the development of this currency has met the development of the economic cycles in terms of revenue. We have reduced transaction costs and exchange rate issues. This has ensured stability in the region. After 2008 and after the debt crisis of the years 2015, and then the pandemic in the year 2020, the European central banks have had to evolve in a context of shock and divergence. However, the ECB has been able to adjust rapidly to the situation and has supported countries in order to support the euro and also improve its attractiveness at international level. Overall, the benefits in terms of politics and economics of the euro have outweighed its costs. The euro has been consolidated and strengthened. It's not just a currency reserve, it's also a debt issuance currency, and it's a way of invoicing commercial transactions. The euro has particular importance when it comes to developing the Balkan region in particular. Based on socio-European values, the single currency is a major institutional asset in developing the Western Balkans. In my view, in order to extend its influence and stabilize the region, the euro should be introduced in these countries. In addition, many institutions and people in this region would prefer to use the euro. Bulgaria and Croatia, in the midst of the 2020 crisis, have taken measures to further the banking union. Today, both countries are moving towards the adoption of the euro for 2024. To conclude, I believe that faster expansion of the euro to the Western Balkans would have economic, politic, and geopolitical advantages for the European Union and the Eurozone. Thank you. Thank you. Marco Pavic is not with us. Sergio Batelli, you have the floor.
Grazie Presidente, grazie alla Presidente Lagarde.
President Lagarde, 20 years after the introduction of the euro, the single currency has become the world's second most important currency after the US dollar. But we would like to further strengthen the euro on the global scenario. And for this reason, it is important to ensure a unified representation within the institutions and the international financial conferences as by virtue of the treaties. I would like also to underline that the euro is presently the main currency for green investment. Half of green bonds in the world are denominated in euro. Now, we need to, this is the right path, that we should continue this path. The Union can and must be a global reference, a global role model in the issuing of bonds that have a positive impacts for the environment. A stronger single currency will be based on a digital euro. The European Central Bank is now considering this project, and of course, we shall have to carefully develop the new digital currency so as to reap its benefits and avoid undesired effects. But I believe it is in everybody's interest to foster this project, foster digitalization of the European economy, and stimulate innovation of the payment system without neglecting the need to affirm the sovereignty of the central bank in the financial and monetary field and to provide stability to the to the global digital finance. So the reform of economic governance, which is under discussion and is important, and should also be the focus of the attention of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Now we need to consider the macroeconomic scenario following the pandemic. We should revise the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact. That should be based on more simple, more transparent, clearer measurements. And it is important to see that the new rules should support growth, investments, and support the digital transformation. For this reason, some instruments developed by the Union during the crisis, like Shore and Next Generation EU, can be a useful model for the future. And lastly, we need to complete the banking union through the establishment of its third pillar, a common system of guarantee for bank deposits. Thank you very much for the attention. Goodbye.
Merci.
Thank you. And the final person on the list, Mr. Van Goedsehoven. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. The euro is celebrating its 20-year anniversary, and it seems quite self-evident and established in our lives that it's difficult to fathom the progress that we have made, but it is a symbol for all of our European citizens. It circulates between all of our peoples and is used on a day-to-day basis in the Union. This common adventure has not been easy, and although a high number of our younger citizens did not know previous currencies, it's necessary to remind what has been. As often, many crises have been traversed thanks to solidarity and resilience. Since the beginning of the euro, it has facilitated the day-to-day lives of individuals and companies by removing issues with exchange rates. It has therefore accelerated the speed of trade within our single market and has contributed to tightening the links that now join us together. The euro has recently been harnessed within the Recovery and Resilience Plan. It is one of its very concrete implications in the short term. Nevertheless, we must take a look forward, and our debates today require us to strengthen this collaboration. And despite this climate of uncertainty and rapid inflation, I would like to thank Madam President for the message that you delivered today. I share this commitment to price stability and the acceleration of investments in renewable energies and also the digital field, which is an essential point. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time when we look forward to the future, I have no doubt that the changes that we will undergo over the next months and years will be able to be overcome as a collective. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gaëtan. Madam President, you have the floor if you would like to answer those remarks and questions. You can stay where you are if you would prefer to do so.
Je reste en bas, je vous laisse en haut. Seul.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, whether you are present here physically or virtually, I would first and foremost like to thank you very much for your questions, your interest and your curiosity, and also your points of views, which were not questions, but are important values for the ECB because it demonstrates your interest and your positions, your different points of views and your take-up of the European project and your political affinities. So thank you very much for those remarks. I have decided to group together some of my answers, not to avoid answering some of you, but just to ensure that there is some coherence and consistency in what I'm saying. I want to first of all focus on the euro, because two of you, so the deputy from the member of parliament from Croatia and the member of parliament from Bulgaria, you are from Spain, are you not? Where is our Bulgarian friend? He joined us virtually. That's correct. So you are both candidates to enter the Eurozone and to adopt the euro as a currency. I see this as a sign of encouragement and of the enthusiasm of your country, because I know to what extent your authorities want to join the Eurozone. And I also want to point out for all of those here who believe that the euro is something that has been acquired and that is a done deal, that was an easy feat. You all know, particularly in Croatia and Bulgaria, that things are not as easy as that, and that giving up one currency to adopt a new currency and implementing all of the principles of operation and all the different principles of payment between the different EU zone countries, which I hope after the Converge report, which will be published in June 2022, I hope that it will not be a zone of 19 member states, but 21 member states. I think that you embody, through this determination to join the zone, this factor of resilience and unity, which makes up the euro and has done since the last 20 years. There are a few of us in this chamber who remember what it was like before the euro, the difficulties we experienced with valuation and significant economic problems linked to the different currencies that did not unite us, but rather separated us. So this euro, which is stable and established, it is now the second international reserve currency in the world, the first being the dollar, the second being the euro, as I just said. And this is very interesting, particularly when we look at the volume of the reserves of the central bank across the globe. What we see is that after the major global financial crises between 2008 and 2011, the volume of euro reserves considerably diminished compared to the dollar, specifically. However, and I truly believe this, thanks to our ability to respond to the economic crisis following the pandemic, the volume of international reserves in euro has not moved. That is to say that the euro was not weakened by the crisis. The euro remains the second international reserve currency, and I am hopeful that if we continue to move forward in this vein of the development and strengthening of the European Union, and in particular the Eurozone through the banking union and capital markets, and improving our fiscal policies, which I will talk of in a moment, I'm convinced that we will be able to develop things in this way. Just a few words about the Stability Pact, the Stability and Growth Pact that some of you mentioned, and that the European Central Bank, with its Council of Governors, so the 19 governors of your member states, we have made a decision to send this to the European Commission, starting with Eurofin, which works on growth and stability, and which I'm sure will be discussed during the French presidency. We have taken a position which is similar to some of the remarks that you made in terms of the Growth and Stability Pact. It's a pact which is necessary because fiscal discipline is essential between member states, particularly those that are joined by a common currency. We need a pact which implements an effective discipline. We need impacts which are simpler and more comprehensible. And we have also added, because we believe that this is important, we've added a pact which allows for fiscal policies to be more harmonized, and we also require an autonomous fiscal capacity. And over the next few months, I think that we will have a lot of debates about this fiscal facility, or the way that this budgetary solidarity can be expressed, in what format, with which projects, with what oversight from the different parliamentary institutions, both at the European level and the national level. And this is an area of work which is significant, because the exemptions that were implemented during the pandemic cannot remain in place forever and will have to be replaced.
la remise en place du régime normal hors clause d'exemption.
The third point that I would like to mention, which answers some of your questions, relates to innovation. A number of you mentioned the digital currency and the way in which the European Central Bank can contribute to this movement of innovation. As the President of the European Central Bank, I'm convinced that we must take strides to try to think about the problem, to find solutions, to identify where we can intervene, to determine both at the technological and political levels, and also the philosophical level, how this digital currency can be implemented. We must keep things simple. And a number of people have said, why do we need so long to explore this problem? Why have we not implemented it already? Well, you asked me about the timeline, and I hope that it will be less than 5 years. A year ago, I said we needed 5 years. I'm not sure whether that can go down to 4, but some people who are working on the project have been told me that it's very difficult. Just to give you an idea, the Chinese authority, so the Chinese central bank, has been working on this project for roughly 7 years. For a year and a half, they've been telling us that they are about to launch their digital currency. We have not seen it yet. We will see whether it will be introduced for the Beijing Winter Games. The National Bank in Sweden has also been working on a currency for 4 years and is still not ready to introduce this digital currency to the market. So there are a number of problems. We have high objectives and great ambition. So the currency must be simple, it must be easy to use by our citizens, it should absolutely protect their individual freedoms, and all of their personal data must be held confidentially. One thing that we learned is that personal data and respecting personal data is paramount. We will require a level of demand in terms of the operability of the different countries, which requires a lot of work, and we also need technology which will act as the backbone for the digital currency exchanges, which will also evolve. We mentioned the distribution ledger technology, DLT, which makes it possible to identify transactions confidentially. This is a technology which is becoming outdated, and we must ensure that we use the best technologies. So I hope it will be less than 5 years, but during 2023 we will have to decide together, because I think that this is not a project that can be led exclusively by the ECB or by governments. It's a project which must involve parliaments, because we are talking about the protection of personal data and individual protections and the way that we exchange and carry out transactions with a digital currency. So those are the remarks I wanted to share with you very briefly. Mr. Chair, if you would like for me to focus on other topics, please let me know. There is one point that I would like to emphasize, and this is the climate dimension of a central bank's activities. This may be surprising to you, because the main remit of a bank is not to protect the environment, and the mandate of the European Central Bank is price stability in the framework of monetary policy. However, it is evident and clear that with the current circumstances and with the European policy to protect the environment and biodiversity, all institutions, including the European Central Bank and other central banks, must identify as part of their mandate how they can also contribute to protecting the environment and fighting against climate change and protecting biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, I will conclude there. Thank you very much, Madam President. I think that you have provided very in-depth responses to the questions that were raised. I think you answered all of those questions. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I think that all of the members present here are very pleased to have been here to hear from you today. Thank you very much on behalf of the Senate. And thank you to the Senate for making this format hybrid available to us. Madam President, this is the first time that we are holding a hybrid meeting of this kind. It's the anniversary of the Euro, but it's also the anniversary of this particular format. Thank you very much.
Mesdames et messieurs les présidents, je vois que les uns et les autres.
Ladies and gentlemen, chairpersons, I can see that some people are beginning to leave, which I understand because people have trains and planes to take and they must not leave them. We are going to conclude our work and I will give the floor to Sabine Thilae before taking back the floor. But before that, at the moment, the group photograph that we took is currently being distributed, so if you would like to take one of those before you leave, I think it is a nice souvenir.
Merci, chers collègues.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Just a few words to conclude our meeting. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you for the good cooperation between the National Assembly and the French National Assembly and the French Senate. It is great to be able to work in this manner. We're not all from the same political parties here, but we're able to work together and to build together. Thank you to the different administrations as well who have supported us and who must now get ready for more work since you have accepted to create the working groups that we had hoped for. So thank you very much for that. You will in due course receive an email which will explain how we will be putting all of this in place. So thank you very much also to Clément Beaune and Christine Lagarde for having presented the French priorities for the presidency of the Council of the European Union, and thank you very much for going over the last 20 years of the Euro. Thank you to all of you for your remarks. The French presidency and all presidencies are very short, just 6 months, and so it's about working together. We must take into consideration what has happened before and what will happen afterwards. But we all have the same challenges: the climate, the digital technologies, innovation, borders, defense, security, rule of law, everything that we've mentioned here together today. As Christine Lagarde, we have many problems, but these problems are interdependent. And I think that this is something that we must take away. We cannot examine each problem in silos. We must take a collective approach. And we must do this as members of parliament. We are in an ever-changing world, and we must also adapt. There may be things that jeopardize our democracies and the rule of law, but we must once again examine all of this very closely. And this is why I believe that sometimes we must change the way we work. We created the European Union to overcome internal divergences. We are in a world where we must take a position vis-à-vis the external work, and no member state of the European Union is able to do this alone. We will only be able to do this by working together. And I think that this is a pragmatic way of working. The world is evolving. And so the three words of the French presidency, recovery, strength, and a sense of belonging. And this belonging also goes through the messages that we pass on to our voters and to our constituencies. So thank you very much for being present, either here physically or virtually, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. I'm not going to take much more of your time because I think that Sabina has said everything there's to say. I think that you've seen that we've had a very fruitful debate today, and I think we've had some very good results as well because we've decided on setting up the working groups. The last presentation from Madame Lagarde was indeed very, very interesting, very full, sometimes a little bit technical for those of us who actually aren't involved in finances in a very detailed manner. But I must say I very much appreciated her presentation to us this afternoon, and the fact also that she was happy to come along. And we know that the euro is in safe hands. I think that this evening we can go home safe in that knowledge. And I do hope that the COVID situation will improve. I'm not going to say that it's going to continue to improve because we've reached a plateau here in France, but I hope that things will improve so that we'll be able to actually meet in person or have more people here in person at the National Assembly, because I think it's been a great pleasure to be able to see some people in person and be able to have this real exchange with you rather than a virtual exchange. So thank you all. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you for attending this COSAC meeting. You're going to be leaving, I hope, with some satisfaction. We were very pleased to be able to welcome you here today. Thank you very much.